If I can't keep my head held high enough, I'll just speak love and watch the smiles come, bring my spirits up. There's some shit I like to fix, but I still know that I'm blessed.
Welcome back to my coverage of the Kristin Smart trial. We are in week 8. This is Thursday, September 8th of 2022. This will be a short week. Court will only be in session this Wednesday and Thursday. The jury seems to be getting restless as well. You'll find out more about what that is later in today's episode. This is all occurring in Salinas, California at the Monterey County Courthouse, of course, after the change of venue from San Luis Obispo.
Paul and Ruben Flores were back in court today for the Kristin Smart murder trial.
And in California, jurors hear key prosecution testimony from a forensic expert in the California case of Paul and Ruben Flores as they stand trial for the 1996 disappearance and death of Kristin Smart.
Before we get into her testimony today, remember when I mentioned wondering why the fibers were not mentioned in the previous testimony? There were no fibers found in the 4x6 clandestine grave, is what she testified to, the previous expert. It looks like my guess was correct, and the lab expert will present that evidence. Fibers are very small, so the on-site investigators wouldn't be dealing with that at all, so it makes sense. I feel better now.
An expert in trace evidence was first on the witness stand on Thursday. She talked about some of what was found in soil samples from Ruben Flores' Arroyo Grande home during a 2021 dig.
And the first witness today is Faye Springer. She's a private contractor for Sacramento County District Attorney's Office, and she works for their evidence lab, and she was part of reviewing that evidence from the 2021 dig, and she's going to review her findings today during her testimony. Much of her 50-year career was working with trace evidence, also known as very small evidence, including fiber, hair, paint, glass, things like that, analyzing them. Once all of Springer's expertise, type of experience, length of experience, all those particulars were reviewed, the judge decided to designate her an expert witness with 50 years underneath her belt in trace evidence. On May 27th, 2021, Springer said she received an evidence package from SLO Sheriff's Department with 3 tape lifts inside. She explains that tape lifts are a, quote, very common way of collecting and preserving trace evidence, end quote, and that she commonly looks through a microscope to analyze the fibers. She explains a hairbrush was in the envelope as well. She assumed the hairbrush was to use hairs for comparison if any fibers turned out to be hair fibers. None turned out to be hair. Springer gives more details that the fibers were already on gel lifts, which, as I said, are the common way for collection and preservation. That's the system used by detectives for this type of trace evidence. Springer went on to reveal that she could identify both natural and synthetic fibers in black, brown, and red, plus another undetermined colored fiber. One source also mentioned the color blue being found, but my most reliable source, who I'm going to stick to him, did not mention the blue fibers. Kristin was wearing the following the night she went missing in May of 1996, so many years ago. She had red shoes, black vinyl shorts, and a gray top. She was wearing all that the last night she was seen alive. Prosecution asked the witness, could the light color be white? Answer, yes. And she added there was also, quote, decomposing plant material and soil on the loose, end quote, on the lifts. Some fibers were cotton and some were synthetic. She didn't check the type of synthetic fibers. And the prosecution asked, could it have been nylon? Springer answered yes. She also said the fibers were preserved for future comparison. She never received a comparison material, therefore she can't confirm the materials or where they came from, only that they were synthetic.
During cross-examination, Paul's attorney Robert Sanger clearly tried to counter the evidence.
Sanger asked Springer if construction, other residents living there, or even investigators or crews that were at the house could have left fibers behind, contaminating the scene. Springer answered, yes, it's possible. Sanger busted out his pink construction twine again from weeks ago. Remember that? When the developer was there and he asked questions about it. So he's going to use the twine as a prop again. And speaking of which, I haven't heard of many physical evidence props presented in court during this trial. I can appreciate those dramatic moments where the actual evidence comes out, like a big old bed they drag in the courtroom, or the car door is brought in for the jurors. It's so impactful. Too bad they didn't bring in that actual 3-foot section of the cargo trailer floor. That would have been a really dramatic effect. Man. Okay, here goes my imagination. Sorry, detour. They should have brought the floor section in, completely darkened the courtroom, sprayed the blue star, and let the light show begin. OMG, that would have gone a long way. I know little about Blue Star, but it does work on old blood, even over 20 years old, according to my research. Okay, now it's progressing to rabbit hole time. Sorry. Detour wasn't enough. We're going a little deeper than that. Check out the manual cover for the Blue Star. And item 7 mentions respraying. And that was one of my questions, if you could spray once you've already sprayed. The manual does caution that overspraying could dilute very low quantity samples of DNA, compromising the analysis. I noticed the warning at the top of the page that says, quote, training formula, end quote, destroys DNA and should only be used for training purposes. This all leads my non-expert brain to think this actually could have been done. Why wouldn't they have? It would have been perfect. Sanger would have blown his top, Misek would have been confused or looking the other way, and the jurors would have audibly gasped, collectively in unison. Judge O'Keefe would overrule Sanger's objection and then admonish the jurors for the emotional reaction. Anyone tell me why they didn't. There better be a good reason. That would have been the most perfect Perry Mason moment ever. Modern Perry Mason for the younger viewers. Perry was a TV attorney from the Perry Mason show from 57 to 66. It was a very popular show, and he always had that moment in the trial that unexpectedly and dramatically changed the perception and influencing the outcome of the trial. Okay, let's reel in my imagination. Let me know in the comments your thoughts on my invented Perry Mason episode starring Blue Star. Okay, where were we? Oh yes, Sanger and the pink twine prop. He asked Springer if the pink twine could be confused with red synthetic fibers. Answer, she said she'd be able to identify the difference between that type of synthetic fiber and fluorescent pink, and that red wouldn't look the same. He then asked if the colors fade over years, and she answered, yes. Springer confirms that the pink Mason twine is braided nylon. Sanger asked her if she knew how long that the fibers were in the soil, and she answered no. Okay, let's see. Sanger also asked Springer, quote, so this little collection of things you looked at, they were consistent with fibers you would expect to find around a construction site or a house? Answer, they could be, sure. She added that she didn't know who marked the evidence, and she reiterated that she did not do a comparison analysis. So Sanger went on and asked, when you're doing trace evidence, One of the main things you're generally asked to do is compare your findings to something else. You are not asked to do that in this case? She answered, no. She further clarified that she wasn't given an original source, such as the clothing the fibers came from. Side note, because that's impossible. Sanger wanted to know if it was possible that those working the excavation could have contaminated the sample. She said yes. Then he showed pictures of the excavation and points out that people working there and the clothing they're wearing, and then again asks if any of them are the source of the contamination in this photograph. And she agrees they could be, and adds later a dryer vent in the photo could also have potentially contributed to the presence of the fibers. And I don't have that picture, sorry guys. I must say though, a picture tells 1,000 words, and this is really one of the better strategies by Sanger. And I admit it does raise some reasonable doubt. I hate giving him credit, but as I've mentioned previously, we can't wear rose-colored glasses. Have to stay in reality. Springer also agrees with Sanger that the fibers were very small to be found at a burial site, which typically contains a lot of extraneous material that goes along with the fibers. She further explains the fibers can decompose and change appearances. They are affected by soil and by the elements. I just found out earlier during direct examination that Sanger interrupted while Springer was looking down at the documents explaining the fiber color data, and he says he just wanted to make sure he has what Springer was reading. And Prevel, of course, was a little irritated again and said he'd given it to him over a year ago. And it's just more examples of how sloppy Sanger is. And the jury reacts to that when he's sloppy. They don't appreciate it. Sanger tried to get Springer to agree that she could have done comparisons with possible similar types of clothing. She said, yes, but they might not look the same. Even being laundered differently can change the look and make it look different. Sanger says he doesn't have too many more questions. Jury question, jury question. Do you know where the lifts were taken from? Answer, not specifically, other than the description given by the detectives. Then Sanger, the weirdo in this case, says he thinks he's running out of ectoplasm. So he says he thinks he'll sit down. Then he announces there's a jury question. Before we cover the jury question, I wonder what that ectoplasm comment was about. Either something was said and not reported on, or he was being a smarty pants. Hard to tell. The jury question was, can you explain the difference between natural and synthetic fibers? How they look? Answer. Man-made tend to be uniform, shiny, with uniform cross-sections. Natural is easy to tell. Cotton is ribbony and tends to fold upon itself. They look different in their size and their shape. Mr. Harold Misek, who is Ruben's defense attorney, only had one question for his cross-examination of Springer, and he said, in honor of your impending retirement after 50 years in the field, Mr. Prevel asked if you could assign any significance to this minuscule amount of trace evidence material. Do you remember you said no? Answer. I cannot assign any significance. Misek said, that's all I have, and bon voyage. Man, he's a trip, in my opinion. Springer was excused from the stand at 1:45 p.m. Next to testify will be Jennifer Hudson. And before we hear what she has to say, I'm going to remind you my opinion. I've briefly barely touched on it before. I've never felt her story sounded solid. I actually kind of hoped they wouldn't call her to the stand at all. But when I put a little more thought behind it, at this point, since we all know about her and what her claims are regarding Paul, it may be better for prosecution to call her to testify versus the defense, because the defense could actually angle it to their benefit easier this way if they were to, if the prosecution were to change their mind and not call her. This is just my guesswork. I expect Sanger to have a field day with her, though. Okay, let's strap on our seatbelts, see how this goes. She begins by setting the stage where what she's going to testify to occurred, and she described it as, quote, a social environment where people would go to skate back in 1996. By the way, here in the U.S., that refers to skateboarding. It was a house in rural Wasna with a skate ramp out in the backyard. She and her friend, whose nickname was Red, were chilling on a couch outside facing a skate ramp. She says Paul came and sat across from them. It was approximately 5 feet away. The prosecution also established that Jennifer was only 17 years old in 1996 when this all occurred. She went on to claim the radio was on at the time, and the radio would have public outreaches about Kristin during commercial breaks. They had quite a few of them because she was missing in the local area. This is when she claims Paul made a statement about Kristin. Warning here, guys, there's going to be some foul language again. Jennifer said Paul told her, quote, that bitch was a dick tease, end quote, and that he was, quote, done playing with her, end quote. She also recalled him saying either he put her or buried her under his skate ramp in Wasna. Wait, his ramp? Jennifer described his demeanor was very cold. Here's her chilling description that we've heard before regarding Paul's cold eyes. She said, quote, even after all these decades, his eyes are what made me 1,000% believe it wasn't a joke. She also said there was nothing alive behind his eyes. She said he had no smirk, no smile, no tone of I'm being funny. She said Paul was really pale and referred to his eyes as, quote, a dead person's eyes. She claims they left within minutes because she was so creeped out. She said she was 17 years old and scared. Continuing on with direct examination with Jennifer Hudson, she says a few weeks later she saw Paul again when she drove people out to a party at the same location in Wasna. She described driving out to the rural area with a white truck in front of her leading the way. Once they arrived, Paul exited the white truck and asked Jennifer if she wanted to skate with them. She says as soon as she saw him, she recognized him and got ill. Some reports say that she vomited in testimony. She immediately left, realizing that Paul was the same person from before who admitted to Smart's murder only weeks prior. Jennifer said she was too afraid to tell police. She didn't have family nor a place to hide at that point in her life. She said, quote, it's not an excuse, but that's what it is, end quote. She claims in 2002 she told her former roommate, and other sources say he was a live-in boyfriend at the time, Justin Goodwin. She said she told him about what Paul said to her. She admits they were very drunk at the time. And almost 20 years later, around 2019, Jennifer found out Goodwin put in an anonymous tip to the cops about what she had told him. She hadn't even talked to him for almost 20 years at that point. She remembered telling him that she didn't want anyone to know because she was terrified of the police and that she didn't want to get involved in the case at all. Okay, let's head into cross-examination by Robert Sanger. This is likely to get messy. Let's see how it goes. So Jennifer agrees with Sanger that she was 24 years old in 2002. And then he says, so you weren't a scared 17-year-old in 2002? And she answers, I'm still scared. I'm not 17 years old. Jennifer claims she never knew Paul before that night. Sanger states that Goodwin says, you used to stay up all night doing meth with Paul. Holy crap, wait. Okay, this one's a shocker. Now, this explains her opposition to going to the police. If she truly was a meth user, I do not know. I have never, not once, ever heard about Paul doing meth or anyone in this circle doing meth or meth being involved in this situation. I don't even know what to think, to be honest. All accounts portray Paul as having a alcohol problem, and that's proven by the arrest and all the trouble he gets in and the way he acts and so on. Has anyone else watching this ever heard about Paul using any hard drugs? My head is spinning right now. Is it just me, or does anyone else find it odd that Sanger is willing to expose Paul as a meth head tweaker, staying up all night to make Jennifer look bad? It's just weird to me. It just adds one more reason to not think highly of Paul. And usually, an attorney's going to want to play their client up to make them look good, not worse. I just don't see why he wants to give the jurors one more reason to despise Paul. It's such an odd strategy to me. Let me know what you think in the comments. All right, let's get back to Jennifer's testimony. That was wild. That is not what I was expecting at all from Jennifer or anyone else in this hearing. So moving on. She answered that question by saying, that is absolutely incorrect. It wasn't until years later, after his creepy statement when she saw a TV show that ID'd Paul as a suspect. Sanger alludes that she possibly told others about her encounter with Paul between 2002 and 2019. She maintained Goodwin was the only one that she ever told. In 2019, after Goodwin put his tip in with the police, he called Hudson and told her to contact Chris Lambert, the podcast creator, about Kristin's case, in hopes of possibly help finding Kristin's body. She reluctantly did meet with Chris Lambert in 2019, where she took Goodwin and a real estate agent, which that's weird. I don't know why a real estate agent, but anywho. Took them all to where she said Paul was getting out of his truck in Wasna so many years prior. And this is where Jennifer believed is where the location was where Paul also said he had buried Kristin. Sanger then read one of his own statements from a preliminary hearing from 2021, where he told Jennifer that Goodwin instructed in a Facebook message to her to make a good showing with the police so they, or Chris Lambert, could get the reward money, right? She answered, the statement was ridiculous and lacks context, and she says she can't imagine Goodwin just came out and said, quote, put on a show, end quote. She said she and Goodwin stopped talking after 2019 because she didn't like Goodwin and Lambert's posture on any of this. I found that an odd statement about Chris Lambert. First I've heard of his ploy to get the reward money, supposedly, allegedly. According to Jennifer's testimony, she said that Chris Lambert told her not to tell the cops certain things. She said she told police everything she knew. I don't know, guys. That just makes me uncomfortable, and you know how I was already thinking about this testimony, but I don't know her. I don't know the situation. I am not calling her a liar. I'm just telling you my opinions and my gut feelings. Please share with me how you feel about this witness in the comments below. I am so curious how the jurors are taking all this, because, you know, they keep hearing about the podcast. My understanding is they couldn't be on the jury if they have watched it. I mean, listened to it. Sorry, I always say watched, because I do it through my television, even though it's a podcast. So what do you guys think the jurors are thinking? And I personally feel that Chris Lambert, by all accounts and everything I've heard, is a good man of good character. And that's part of why it's so hard for me to believe what she says. I've never heard him talk about the reward. And also, we got to remember that Paul mentioned to his dorm roommate that Kristin was at his mom's house, half joking. So maybe the jurors are looking at that part and thinking that it's possible that he would have made a comment, flippant or accurate or otherwise. I don't know. It's a trip. All right, I'm putting deeper thought into this. And what worries me is I want to be able to believe her testimony because I want him to be found guilty. And I'm having a hard time believing her original testimony. And now she's trying to throw shade to Chris Lambert and talking about reward money. And now we're talking about meth. And it's like, I mean, seriously, I just feel like that didn't go well and even worse than I possibly could have imagined. I do feel a little bit better, however, when I realize even if the jurors threw out every single thing that she said, it doesn't really hurt the case that much, in my opinion. So, Sanger went on to locate some cell phone evidence from Jennifer's phone that he had presented prior in a preliminary hearing. And he searched and his people searched, and it ended up that he nor anyone else in court could locate the evidence. Jeez. So the judge decided to release the jury early for the day. We can finally hear from a few experts again. It's been scarce for a while, but I did come across this with the latest opinions of what's been presented in court so far. I always find it interesting what people that know so much more than I do think about all this.
Now, Josh, experts testify that human blood and matching fibers, as we heard, were located in Ruben's property. Is that enough for a conviction for such a long case, that's a long time since the case was last investigated?
Those of us hoping for justice feel like this is plenty. Let's see if the experts feel like the evidence is enough. Is it enough?
Is that enough by itself? No. But it's put together with everything else that the prosecution has put on, I think yes. You have to remember, for the prosecution, this is a case of a death by 1,000 cuts. No pun intended there. But what they're doing is they're trying to get the jury to ask the question of what are the chances? What are the chances that in the same house where possible blood and fibers were found, that same person had dogs signal to his bed at his dorm room? What are the chances that same person would be the person that was last seen with Kristin Smart? What are the chances that same person would be the one who was changing his story about injuries that he had the following day? What are the chances that same person would have wiretaps where he's having conversations with his mother about possibly finding holes in a podcast discussing the case? So you put all of that together, and no, one piece of evidence on its own does not stand. It's not a smoking gun. But you add all of these together, and I think you have a case that you can ask a jury beyond a reasonable doubt to return a conviction.
Exactly. Death by 1,000 cuts. I love how he recapped everything and added his expert opinion and what are the chances. And yes, beyond a reasonable doubt.
Yeah, Terry, Josh is pretty bullish on this, and Kristin Smart did, in fact, disappear in 1996. So how difficult do you think it'll be for the prosecution to prove this case beyond a reasonable doubt?
You know, we cover all sides here, and we have to take our rose-colored glasses off now and again. So let's hear this expert's opinion.
Listen, like all cold cases and like all cases without a body, this is going to be very difficult. And obviously, in order to get a conviction, that prosecution is going to have to prove the case beyond a reasonable doubt. If just one juror has doubt, there's not going to be a conviction.
Even though I don't always like what they say, she makes a really good point here that it really does only take one juror to have reasonable doubt. It's interesting, the flip side of perspective as well.
And the witnesses on the stand, especially those experts, they're going to be grilled. They already have been grilled on cross-examination about their techniques, about any inconsistencies they may have had in prior testimony. So that's going to give those jurors some doubt.
Boy, howdy, have we seen that throughout the trial. That is one of Sanger's most favorite things to do, although in my opinion, he hasn't been extremely successful in discrediting, although who knows what's in the minds of those jurors.
And other witnesses who aren't experts, they're going to be questioned about their memory. There was one witness who had a conversation and she said that his eyes look cold. Well, they're going to be tested on all of that, and that's going to leave some doubt in those jurors' minds.
We all know who she's referring to here, Jennifer. You already know my opinion about what she had to say, and it really is scary that people can interpret the same evidence so differently.
And you have to remember also that the sheer lack of evidence, that's going to present a huge problem. They have these little trace samples of blood and trace samples of fibers, but is that enough? And so I think it's going to be very difficult for that prosecution.
Let's hope that all 24 jurors feel the same. They have to be found guilty, man. They can't get away with this, and Kristin and her family deserve justice, and I just pray that she's located somehow.
Smart disappeared after a party 26 years ago. Paul Flores was reportedly the last person seen with her walking her home that May night. Smart was declared legally dead years later, though her body has never been found. Paul and his father, Ruben, had long been suspected of being involved in her disappearance. Last year, the father and son were arrested. Paul was charged with murder, his father with accessory after the fact, accused of covering up Smart's death and burying her body in his backyard, and later moving the remains. If convicted, Paul faces 25 years to life in prison. His father faces up to 3 years behind bars.
Towards the end of the day, the jurors sent another note to Judge O'Keefe asking again about when to expect the trial to conclude. They wanted to know if it was set to wrap up by mid or late October. As she has done in the past, she declined to speculate other than to say, the proceedings are on schedule. These people are probably miserable. I'm starting to feel bad for these jurors. During jury selection, they were told to expect the trial to go into October. There's no court Friday, as I said. Back in session on Monday, September 12th, 2022. Jennifer is expected back on the stand. And by Monday, hopefully, Sanger can locate his evidence. To me, that's one more tick mark on his sloppy record, in my opinion. As always, justice for Kristin.
If I can't keep my head held high enough, I'll just be love and watch the smiles come.
Thanks for watching.
Bring my spirits up.
Don't forget to stop and smell the flowers.
There's some shit I like to fix, but I